Get ready to step behind the scenes of the Wild West. Between 1850 and the early 1900s, as railroads expanded and new towns sprang up, shootouts, robberies, and gold rush dreams fed legends that often hid some uncomfortable truths. Using dusty old archives and expert interviews, we've put together 24 discoveries that challenge the official stories. With each fact, you'll see that gunslingers, sheriffs, and cattle barons were way more complex than the movies make them out to be. And this is just the beginning. Number 1. The Outlaw Hunters. In the lawless Wild West, just hearing the name Pinkerton in a conversation was enough to make gunslingers switch roads. In 1850, Allan Pinkerton founded an agency that swapped the revolver for a notebook. Wanted posters, organized files, early experiments with fingerprints, and reports that traveled the country by train. That's how Jesse James got cornered. Even without being cuffed, the squeeze cut off escape routes, dried up the funds that kept the James Younger gang going, and forced them into tighter and tighter hiding spots. The agency's fame grew with its success. Governors, steel barons, and railroad tycoons started paying for the same hammer that struck fear into robbers. Between clipboards and Colts, the first major private security service in the U.S. was born, proving that well-kept intel could be more powerful than gunpowder, and that in that boundless land, the law had learned to ride the rails. Number 2. The strange gold and diamond scam. In 1872, the echo of gold fever was still turning rumors into riches. In that atmosphere, Philip Arnold and John Slack announced a remote site in Colorado where diamonds, rubies, and gold nuggets would appear with just one swing of a pickaxe. The next day's newspapers ran triumphant headlines, and telegrams flew across the country calling investors to this miracle mine. Before long, high society in San Francisco and New York was doing the math, as bankers, politicians, and tycoons rushed to get in before the land got split up. The trick played out at night. The two men buried gems bought from jewelry stores exactly where they'd bring their guests. By morning, just a few inches of digging was enough to set off flashing eyes and racing hearts, and checkbooks. Every lucky find fed the belief that the plots were going fast, and that waiting meant missing the train to the next El Dorado. Stock safes filled up as fast as the holes in the ground. By the time geologist Clarence King showed up, the hype was bordering on hysteria. He examined the cuts, facets, and inclusions through a cold lens. None of those stones could have come from that soil. The truth spread faster than the original rumor. Investors realized they'd dug up their own pride, and Arnold and Slack's golden stage collapsed like sand slipping through their fingers. Number 3. Bass Reeves, the black deputy who inspired the Lone Ranger. When guns thundered during the Civil War, young Bass Reeves realized that staying meant going back to being property. He escaped at night to Indian Territory, learned Choctaw and Creek, and built alliances that would later save his life. Years later, after the drums of war went silent, Reeves returned wearing the badge of a U.S. Deputy Marshal west of the Mississippi, a first for a black man. Under the stern eye of Judge Isaac Parker, his reputation grew with every warrant served. Each arrest told a story, and he made over 3,000 of them, some involving outlaws so feared that whole towns would lock their doors. Between canyon ambushes and horseback chases, Reeves lived by one rule: no one runs forever. Many historians see in his legacy the spark that lit the myth of the Lone Ranger. Number 4. Calamity Jane, heroine and legend. Martha Jane Canary was born in 1852 and broke Old West norms by taking on roles as a scout, messenger, and sharpshooter, jobs usually reserved for men on the frontier. Orphaned as a teenager, she led her younger siblings down dusty roads, an experience that shaped her self-confidence. As she grew older, her name popped up in stagecoach convoys, military columns, and newspaper stories. Articles told of rescues under fire, nighttime rides, and lightning-fast shootouts. Critics, though, claimed some of those tales were born in saloons where reporters bought rounds in exchange for a good story. The back and forth between eyewitnesses and skeptics worked like gunpowder. The more versions that spread, the more curious the public got. and every printed line added another layer to the figure walking the line between real woman and growing legend. Number 5. The Colorado Cannibal. In the dead of winter in 1874, guide Alfred Packer left Ouray leading 5 adventurers determined to cross the Rocky Mountains in search of gold. After weeks with no word, he reappeared alone at a trading post, ragged and worn down. To those asking questions, he spoke of sudden blizzards, failing compasses, and fights over food. The story didn't add up. Investigators from Lake City put together a search party, and beneath the thin ice they found his companions. Mutilated bodies, flesh removed with almost surgical precision. Forensic exams confirmed murder and signs of cannibalism. When arrested, Packer claimed self-defense and said he only ate the bodies out of sheer desperation, facing endless snowstorms and bone-chilling cold. Still, the jury found him guilty. The case filled newspaper pages, echoed through saloons, and became part of Wild West folklore, turning Packer's name into a grim symbol of the thin line between survival instinct and savagery. Number 6. The First Heist on Rails. In 1866, a locomotive cut through the night along the Ohio and Mississippi Railway. In one of the cars, suitcases stuffed with bills waited to be delivered to the bank. Outside, John and Simeon Reno moved in after months of mapping out schedules and routes. When the train slowed down to cross a bridge, they jumped aboard, overpowered the conductor, and cracked open the portable safe. In just a few minutes, they disappeared with $13,000, enough to buy entire farms back then. The news spread like thunder. Progress on the rails could also bankroll outlaws. Young criminals, including Jesse James, saw it as a playbook for taking advantage of the brand new railroad network. That's when a ritual was born, one that the movies would turn into a classic Old West icon. Scenes full of danger, speed, and defiance that still feed our fascination with train robbery tales today. Number 7. Johnson County War. In 1892, the plains of Wyoming became the stage for a lopsided showdown. With no solid proof, big cattle barons labeled small ranchers as thieves and hired gunmen to fix the supposed crime. The conflict spread like wildfire. Fences were torn down, homes burned, and lives were taken before any verdict was ever given. Terrified families abandoned land, cattle, and memories, taking only what they could carry in their pockets and stories of horror that echoed through nearby towns. When even local sheriffs found themselves overwhelmed, federal troops crossed into the county, showing the country that out on the frontier, the law could be bought with bullets. The Johnson County War exposed the raw brutality hiding beneath expansion, a reminder that unchecked power turns justice into a commodity. Number 8. The wire that fenced in the Wild West. Until the early 1870s, the landscape of the American Great Plains looked like a sea of grass. With no fences, cattle from different owners roamed freely, and small ranchers lived under constant threat of losing their livestock in the mix. That fragile balance collapsed in 1873, when Joseph Glidden filed a patent for a simple wire dotted with sharp metal barbs. Cheap, easy to install, and scarily effective. The new wire made it possible to mark property lines and protect herds. The invention brought an end to the legendary cattle drives, threw up barriers where there used to be open horizon, and ignited land disputes that would reshape who held power in the West. Within just a few years, every fence put up was another step toward a land under control. Number 9. Belle Starr, the Bandit Queen. Born to Missouri farmers, Myra Maybelle Shirley Reed grew up to the sound of Jesse and Frank James's spurs, old poker buddies of her father. Years later, after marrying the Cherokee Sam Starr, she swapped the piano for the secretive gallops of stolen horses moving through Indian territory. On the road, she wore perfectly tailored dresses, a sharply tilted hat, and underneath the fabric, 2 pistols always at the ready. Reports from the feared Judge Parker described her as blunt, unshaken in front of sheriffs, and quick to mock accusations in court. In 1889, at 40 years old, she was ambushed and gunned down on a dusty trail. No one was ever arrested. The shot that silenced her only fueled the making of a legend, and the next clue in her story lies just up ahead. Number 10. Stagecoach Mary, the iron-willed messenger. Out on the Montana frontier, Mary Fields took charge of the mail stagecoach armed with a rifle, a revolver, and the firm belief that letters don't wait. She set out before sunrise, crossed snowy ravines, pushed the wagon when it got stuck, and walked across rivers covered in thin ice. Every route became talk in the saloons. Some swore they saw bullets bounce off without her even blinking. Others said wolves backed off at the sound of her steady voice. Harsh winters turned doubt into respect. Not a single letter was lost on her watch. By pushing forward where others turned back, Mary cleared a path for women and black folks dreaming of new roles. Her nickname, Stagecoach Mary, is a reminder that courage delivers more than just the mail. And for those following her story, there's still dust on the road and another delivery just around the bend. Number 11. The Ghosts of Bodie. In the dry mountains of California, Bodie burst to life when gold poured out of its mines in 1877. From a handful of shacks grew a maze of saloons, brothels, and poker tables that never emptied. But the boom collapsed just as fast. The veins ran dry, the money disappeared, and 2 fires turned entire blocks to ash. What's left is a town frozen in time. Anyone walking its dusty streets finds bottles still on bar counters, wagons tipped over at the curb, and footsteps that come with no one in sight. Some swear they see figures in the windows. Others return stolen souvenirs after a streak of bad luck, scared of the curse said to follow anyone who takes something from Bodie. One visitor left the old saloon saying the chill that ran through him had nothing to do with the dry air. Truth or legend, every creaking door in the wind holds a fresh whisper for the next brave soul. Number 12. Cochise County War. Tombstone, Arizona was boiling over when the Cowboys challenged authority. Sheriff John Behan tried to negotiate, but the Earp brothers, along with Doc Holliday, chose to face the gang head-on. On October 26, 1881, 30 seconds of gunfire at the OK Corral were enough to change the town's fate and carve their names into Wild West legend. But the gunpowder didn't clear. Ambushes took over deserts and back alleys. At night, armed figures prowled around saloons. When Morgan Earp was shot in the back, Wyatt set off on a relentless manhunt, chasing the killers through dry valleys and dusty trails. Writers described bullets slicing through the wind and buildings riddled with holes, proof that in Tombstone the line between law and violence was razor thin. Number 13. Billy the Kid and his vandalized grave. Fort Sumner, 1881. Sheriff Pat Garrett fires the shot and announces the death of William H. Bonney, better known as Billy the Kid. Word spreads through the saloons, and the 21-year-old gunslinger becomes living folklore, mentioned in songs, newspapers, and lantern-lit conversations. Out on the New Mexico plains, the outlaw's modest grave turns into a pilgrimage site for those chasing a piece of the Wild West. But devotion comes at a cost. The headstone has been scratched, spray-painted, yanked out. It vanished completely twice before being chained to the ground with iron bolts. Even so, coins, bourbon bottles, and dried flowers still pile up there, along with whispers that Garrett may have shot the wrong man. If there's any truth to that, every new scratch on the stone might be a sign that Billy's still riding nearby, laughing at his own legend. Number 14. The Legend of the Lost Dutchman's Gold. In the scorching sands of Arizona, the Superstition Mountains hold a mystery that's been passed down for generations. In the late 19th century, a German prospector, nicknamed the Dutchman, is said to have pulled gold from a hidden vein and taken the secret to his grave. What he left behind were confusing maps, crooked lines, broken coordinates, arrows pointing toward nameless canyons. Since then, waves of adventurers have climbed those steep trails, guided by strange nighttime flashes and whispers that seem to rise up from the cracks. Every step carries the risk of vanishing like so many who dared before. Old newspapers tell of expeditions cut short by sandstorms and bodies found next to rusty pickaxes. Even so, the promise of a shining gold strike keeps luring new faces, convinced the treasure is just around the next bend. Number 15. The Gambler's Madness. The saloon door creaks open and the piano's tune fades into the clink of glasses and the snap of poker chips. Cigar smoke hangs low, hiding faces hungry for luck. At the center of the table, Canada Bill Jones slides 3 cards with fingers so smooth it's like he's bending time. The crowd chases the Queen of Hearts, but Bill only hears the whisper of coins. To him, cheating wasn't a crime. It was a calling. He used to say that money in a scoundrel's hand needed rescuing. That saying echoed through frontier towns, where the promise of gold crashed into gunpowder. On nights when Doc Holliday dropped his dental tools and reached for his revolver, the two of them stitched fate in the blink of an eye. One hand could turn a nobody into a rich man. The next could open the gates to the graveyard. As the whiskey flowed, rumors of Bill's next trick sparked across the room, pulling fresh suckers into the whirlwind. Because in that place, every bet was a thread that could weave or snap a life. Number 16. Scams in ghost towns. When gold veins dried up or the railroad changed course, Old West towns turned into ghost towns. Dusty streets and empty saloons drew in con artists who promised a brand new gold rush. They showed up with nuggets bought in the next county over, smudged maps, and a letter from a respected geologist swearing there were untouched veins. They'd claim the claims would be gone before the next train came through. And driven by that made-up ticking clock, travelers rushed to the bank, signed makeshift receipts, and handed over their life savings. As soon as the money hit, the office shut down, the sign vanished, and the crew disappeared down the road. In places where the law moved slow, all that was left were buildings creaking in the wind and a hard lesson. Folks chasing easy money usually trip over their own hurry. Number 17. Cherokee Bill. Born in 1876 in the heart of Indian Territory to a former slave and a Cherokee woman, Crawford Goldsby grew up between two cultures and traded the plow for a pistol early on. Along stagecoach routes, he started robbing payrolls and mail. Anyone who fought back didn't make it past the second shot. Before long, the press started calling him Cherokee Bill. Federal troops put up wanted posters. Ranches whispered warnings. But he was always already past the next canyon. At 20 years old, surrounded in Fort Smith, he heard his death sentence. On the gallows, he lifted his chin and challenged the hangman. "Hurry up and get this over with. I ain't got all day." The silence that followed hit louder than any of his gunshots. Number 18. The mystery of the Arizona Thunderbird. In 1890, 2 hunters were crossing the dusty fields of Tombstone, Arizona, when they swore they brought down something that streaked across the sky like a living shadow. A giant bird, straight out of the old Thunderbird legends. The Tombstone epitaph reported that the body was nailed to a barn and photographed, but the photo never turned up. From then on, official silence and public chatter went hand in hand. Some said it was a pterosaur that had dodged extinction. Others claimed it was just a headline to sell papers. The missing photo became a holy grail for the curious, popping back up in bars, forums, and radio shows anytime someone asked if monsters still fly over the desert. Until proof shows up, the legend lives in the space between possible and unlikely, ready to take off with every new whisper. Number 19. Charlie Parkhurst, the disguised driver. From a young age, Charlotte Parkhurst hid her birth name under the nickname Charlie and the worn hat of a stagecoach driver. In the American West, no one trusted a woman with a stagecoach, but a skilled man could always find work. Along California's dusty routes, Charlie handled tight turns, braved rain and heat, and kept a steady grip on the reins when robbers raised pistols by the roadside. In one ambush, Charlie didn't flinch even with a gun barrel to the chest, saving both passengers and cargo. When Charlie died in 1879, the town found out he was a woman. Another rumor spread fast. Years earlier, Charlie had cast a secret vote, defying laws that silenced women's voices and getting a head start on the fight for suffrage. Number 20. The Ice Storm and the Great Die-Up. During the winters of 1886 and 1887, a sudden cold snap swept across the Great Plains. Walls of snow buried the grazing fields and froze over water troughs, silencing the cattle bells. Ranches that had relied on mild seasons were trapped, fences vanished, hay got buried, and cattle piled up at the gates like white statues. Ranchers started counting rows of carcasses stretching to the horizon. Some walked into their corrals and found only emptiness where hundreds used to moo. It's estimated that hundreds of thousands of cattle died, dragging down loans, freight, and jobs, marking for many the end of the era of long cattle drives across open range. Number 21. The Marfa Lights. Out on the edge of the Texas desert near Marfa, glowing orbs have crossed the night horizon since the late 1800s. Witnesses report lights that appear split apart, come back together, and then vanish. Researchers from the University of Texas have filmed parts of the phenomenon and tested theories: distant headlights, heat mirages, gas emissions from the ground. None explain why people were talking about the lights decades before the first car ever drove by. The mystery fuels ghost stories and draws crowds of curious folks who pack the viewing area with chairs and blankets, just to catch a glimpse. When the sky is clear, the air is full of anticipation. Even the smallest sound from the fields hushes the crowd. Suddenly, a spark flickers in the distance, grabs everyone's eyes, and makes hearts race. People describe chills, like the whole desert is breathing light. Is it science without an answer yet, or something more? Maybe the next night will tell. Number 22. The Chinese in the West. When gold nuggets still dazzled fortune seekers and railroad tracks pushed toward the Pacific, a quiet wave of workers crossed the ocean. Men like Li Wen left villages in Guangdong to take on 14-hour shifts in the Sierra Nevada. They slept in canvas tents, woke to the blast of dynamite, and picked up their tools before the dust even settled. Constantly at risk, they laid down railroad ties, raised bridges, and carved through terrain that many engineers thought was impossible. Company reports show that in some stretches, 9 out of 10 workers were Chinese, a number that makes it clear their hands helped weld together the transcontinental railroad and stitch the country from coast to coast. When the contracts dried up, this workforce moved on to growing towns. In places like San Francisco, Seattle, and Deadwood, steamy laundries, bustling noodle houses, and narrow corner stores took root. Cultural staples now woven into the fabric of the American West. But progress wasn't enough to stop the prejudice. In 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act built walls that turned dreams of success into daily struggle. Even so, through Mandarin signs and festival drums, you can still hear the perseverance of those who blasted through mountains, and at the same time, opened the way for generations to come. Number 23. Buffalo Bill's spectacle takes Europe by storm. It was the late 19th century. As trains whistled into European capitals, tents went up in minutes, horses neighing, gunpowder in the air. William Frederick Buffalo Bill Cody rolled in with the Wild West show, turning city squares into a vibrant stage for the American frontier. Lightning-fast duels kicked things off. The crowd held its breath as cowboys swung lassos through the air, all leading up to Sitting Bull and his reenactments of attacks that drew both cheers and heated debates. From Paris to Berlin, kings and commoners shared bleachers. In London, Queen Victoria leaned forward to get a closer look at the galloping Mustangs. Headlines turned the show into a continent-wide craze, even as critics warned that native traditions were being turned into exotic props. Still, the box office kept booming, promising even bolder scenes in the next act. Number 24. The Outlaw's Final Rest. When the sunset painted the Old West plains in shades of red, many outlaws had one last request: to take with them into the ground everything that had made them famous. Worn-handled revolvers, dust-stained decks of cards, and half-empty whiskey bottles were placed in their coffins as extensions of their identity. The logic was simple. If those items held their stories, they'd also keep their legend alive. Decades later, every grave holding these relics became a pilgrimage site. Travelers stand in the hush of old cemeteries, cautiously touching the cold steel of a Colt or the chipped cards from countless nights of cheating, hoping to feel a spark of the aura that once shook up sheriffs and saloons. Not everyone, though, comes out of curiosity alone. Treasure hunters, lured by the value of original artifacts, have broken into graves, unfazed by tales of vengeful spirits riding the prairie winds. And so the legend grew that some of the dead guard more than just bones. They guard secrets, feeding the ghostly reputation of these sacred grounds. With this story, we wrap up our series of 24 curiosities that reveal the wildest, weirdest, and darkest corners of the American frontier. Which one surprised you the most? Had you heard any of these before? Drop your thoughts in the comments, share the video with someone who loves a good story, and make sure to subscribe to the channel. The next journey through mysterious land starts with you in the front saddle.